Thank you everyone for joining us. My name is Eric Weiss. I'm joined by Michael Saylor, who obviously needs no introduction. The topic we'd like to discuss is Bitcoin as digital energy. So maybe since we don't all have a background in physics, maybe the best place to start would be, Michael, if you can kind of explain how physics plays an integral role here and kind of level set the room so that we can have a constructive discussion.
Yeah, sure. I'm excited to talk about this because it pops up on Twitter sometimes, but it doesn't lend itself to 280 character tweets. And so getting in a back and forth with someone on Twitter over this subject just doesn't go anywhere. So let's start with the big idea, right? The entire universe is energy. Everything in the universe is composed of energy. You can't destroy it. All you can do is transform it into one form or the other form. The Bible starts with the phrase in the beginning, God said, let there be light. A lot of times we don't really think about what that means. But in fact, if light is energy, what it's really saying is in the beginning, we created energy. It's everything about us is energy. For example, obviously we have light as energy and heat as energy. You've got kinetic energy and potential energy. Electricity is energy. Even sound is energy. Sound just a mechanical wave moving through a medium. And this idea of energy is normally applied to just like electricity, right? And sometimes we get more sophisticated. We apply energy to heat or potential energy, but it doesn't really figure much into the conversation over money and technology nearly so often. We take it for granted. But I stumbled across this quote by Tesla, and he said, "If you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration." And it's such a deep, deep thought. And yet, and of course, he was a genius. But what does it really mean? I mean, most of the time we go to college, we study a little bit of physics and energy, and then we forget about it.
Mm-hmm.
But when you start thinking about it more deeply, energy can be all sorts of forms. And if we get beyond the pure energy forms, one thing that I've noticed is that steel is energy in metallic form. Glass is another form of energy. Concrete and granite are other forms of energy. Even aluminum is a form of energy. I mean, and oil, wood, uranium, and natural gas all look kind of like they're actually forms of energy as well. But here's the big idea. Matter is low frequency energy. And energy is what it is. But if I slow it down to a lower frequency, it starts to look like matter. And once you get this idea that energy comes in all forms and frequencies,
Mm-hmm.
then you're thinking about vibration. Vibration is kinetic energy converted into potential energy, like a spring that's bobbing up and down. It's vibrating because it's going from high potential energy, low kinetic energy to high kinetic energy, low potential energy. And that's why Nikola Tesla said that. And this frequency, this is amazing, right? Because everything's got a different frequency or half-life, if you will. And if you consider all of these things together and energy moving through different forms and vibrating into different forms, and then energy sitting at different frequencies, then you realize that the entire universe is composed of this stuff. And if you want to create something effective, you need to pick the right flavor of energy, the right frequency of energy, the right form of energy. And we see lots of metaphors in money and economics. I'll get to in a second, but I'll make one last point on this before we move on, which is sound. Sound is energy, mechanical energy moving through a medium, and sound moves slower through the air than it moves through the water. and it moves faster through a solid than it does even through a liquid. And that's a function of the stiffness of the solid. And so that energy wave is moving through different mediums at different speeds. It's attenuating, like it's being damped at different rates. And then there are some mediums can't move through, like space, right? Vacuum. There's that joke in Aliens, right? In space, no one can hear you scream,
Mm-hmm.
right? Well, it's just popular culture. But if you think about it more deeply, what we're really saying is certain types of energy move through certain mediums, other types of energy don't. You have to pick the right energy. And if you start to understand the form of energy, then you can figure out the way the universe works.
Yeah,
So,
you mentioned that you were going to relate that to economics. Can you tie that into transition into economics with that? How money is energy,
yeah.
perhaps?
Yeah, so moving in the economic domain, so energy comes in all forms. Money is economic energy. It's social political construct. It depends upon a civilization to have a meaning. That is politics and social conventions matter, but within a civilization, money is energy. Money is economic energy. And property is low frequency money in the same way that matter is low frequency energy. Products are kind of like mid-frequency property. Like a product might have a half-life of 2, 3, 4 years, whereas a home might have a half-life of 50 years, and maybe land might have a half-life of hundreds of years. But needless to say, property is kind of a low frequency, a static form of money. Money is a very liquid, flexible form of economic energy. Services are like work, doing work in that civilized construct, and I'm using work like the physics version of work.
Mm-hmm.
And so what you've got is you've got products, services, and property in the economy. Money can be converted into a product or a service or property. Property and services and products can be sold for money. So what you have is energy going from high frequency to low frequency to mid frequency. Now, what's mid frequency money? Well, if low frequency money is owning a house for 50 years, mid frequency money is like currency
Currency.
or, yeah, legal
Yeah.
tender, like I want to buy something. And they have analogies to energy, because if you want this money to move through a medium, right, there's delay and there's risk and there's cost to all those transformations. Just like it's easier to transmit some forms of energy, like light travels through vacuum pretty efficiently and sound doesn't
Mm-hmm.
travel through vacuum efficiently. There are certain types of monetary energy that travel more efficiently. Like I can't really use my house as monetary property very effectively. Maybe I can use a currency in order to make a transformation.
Mm-hmm. So Bitcoin lends itself to all of the types of frequency and energy that you mentioned. Maybe next, can you tie it together to Bitcoin and talk about Bitcoin as property, maybe digital money, energy, et cetera?
Yeah, it's good. It's a good segue to what is Bitcoin. Well, I mean, Bitcoin is a scarce synthetic asset that can be moved on a network without a double spend. And that's how we described it. But what does the double spend mean? The double spend means conservation of Bitcoin. You can only have one Bitcoin. You can't turn one Bitcoin into a million Bitcoin. And so Bitcoin is information that respects the law of conservation of energy. And that's the breakthrough. All the other information moving on the internet doesn't respect the law of conservation of energy.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we solved the problem of the double spend, and we created a conservative information asset. We created the equivalent of matter and energy in cyberspace. So I would say Bitcoin is digital property, digital money, digital currency, digital energy in different aspects. It's digital property at low frequency. And by that, I mean, if you buy $1 million of Bitcoin with intent to hold it for a decade, it's digital property, put it in cold storage. If, on the other hand, you're moving it every 2 hours to pay for an Uber or an Airbnb or a hotel room, it starts to look like digital money. And what if I move it 1,000 times a minute? Well, at some point, the difference between Bitcoin and other forms of money is traditionally other money moved at a fairly slow rate. Like coins don't move that fast, but even credit card transactions they don't lend itself. Nobody did 10,000 credit card transactions in a day. Right. So you don't think about shining 10 million photons of credit card transactions on anybody. So we really never thought of money or currency as energy before, because it was kind of mid-frequency, at the frequency of commerce. But Bitcoin isn't really limited to the frequency of commerce. So sometimes we refer to microtransactions, and we've seen with really cool apps like Sphinx Chat, you see the idea you could stream Satoshis, in a continuous fashion. Mm-hmm. When you get to the point where you can go faster than the speed of a commercial transaction, now there's you got to think of it in a new way, and that's why I think high frequency Bitcoin is digital energy.
You're going to have to put some more words around that, which I know is not a problem for you.
Okay. So let's talk more. Let's dig more into it. Digital energy. Well, let's talk about a concept people would get: digital music. Okay. How do I create digital music? I have analog music. I have a guitar. I play it. I have a piano. I'm a singer. I have a band. So how do you create digital music from analog music? You create an encoded file. How do you create an encoded file, right, in a digital music format? Well, you have a microphone. The microphone converts sound energy, mechanical energy moving through the air, into electric signals. Now you have electrical energy, but it's still analog. You could run it right into a speaker, mm-hmm. but you didn't really get to the digital part. If you convert the sound energy into analog energy, and then you run it into an encoder on a computer, you can encode that to be a digital music file. So now you've got a file with digital music on it. Now, how do you convert it back into music? You send it over a network, then you send it to a computer and you decode it on the computer, and then you play it either via a speaker, like that's a simple idea, or via peripheral, which actually creates analog music. An example of that would be like a player piano, mm-hmm. where you actually drive the player piano with a digital file, and you started with a piano on one side, you encoded the file, you send it to Tokyo, it comes out as analog music on the other side. There's no speaker. Now, the significance of digital music is I can create 1 million copies of that file, right? The greatest piano player in the world can play the piano in Steinway Hall, and then 10 million people can listen to what they played with almost perfect reproduction. There's no conservation of energy there. But, a lot of times people say, well, Bitcoin can't be digital energy because blah, blah, blah. It's not really pure electricity. And I think an interesting point here to make is a digital music file digital music if I eliminate all the computers and all of the speakers in the world? Right? What is it then? Right? It's right. Yeah. It's like just a file, right? if I obliterate the civilization, or if I take away the internet and the computers, the peripherals, and the speakers, then a digital music file is nothing. Now, what is Bitcoin? Well, Bitcoin is an encoded. Think of it as an encoded file by a computer, right? I create an encoded file with a computer, which is a Bitcoin miner, and with energy, like real energy, electricity. If you give me electricity and run it through a SHA 256 miner, I can get a Bitcoin. Just like if you give me a singer and run them and a microphone and you run it through a computer, I give you a digital music file. But where it's different is this becomes a conservative file. I can now send that over a network. I can decode it on an exchange, in this case, a fiat currency exchange, and I can convert it via a service, a retail service or an energy service or any other type of brokerage service back into either a product or a service or property. And so I start with $1 million worth of electricity. I convert it into a Bitcoin. I got $1 million of Bitcoin. I can either get it by putting pure energy into the network, or I can get access to the Bitcoin by paying $1 million for it. Now I've got $1 million of Bitcoin. I can hold it forever. I can send it. I can break it into 10,000 parts. I can send it to 10,000 places. I can reconstruct it. And then if I run it back through an exchange, the exchange is really converting what is digital energy into political energy, which is fiat currency, the yen or the dollar or the euro. So I convert from Bitcoin to yen. I convert from yen into a product on a retail site, or I convert it into 10 people working full time, or I convert it into a building or whatever I can buy with the thing. And so in this particular case, a digital music file is just a way to more efficiently move music, and digital energy file or a Bitcoin is a more efficient way to move energy. If our civilization ends, neither file is useful, right? The Bitcoin is just a set of keys, and the digital music file is just an encrypted, set of stuff. But as long as the civilization continues, the metaphors are comparable. And of course, with digital music, you have digital music, digital maps. It works for all sorts of digital things. Digital communications, every one of them is an efficient way to transform analog to digital, speed everything up to the speed of light, move it friction-free, and drive efficiencies. The significance of Bitcoin is we never figured out how to create digital property and digital money and digital energy. And in its highest form, the idea of digital energy is profound.
It sounds like in these examples that you're laying out, the frequency, if you will, of our Bitcoin is increasing. Can you talk a little bit? It feels like we're going to need to tap into the Lightning Network here to keep up with the increased frequency of Bitcoin and not have it be a low or low frequency type thing. Can you talk about how the Lightning Network might relate to this as well?
Yeah. I mean, frequency is so important. Coming back to this idea, low frequency Bitcoin is property. If you want to buy a house, you're comfortable with the transaction. You shop for a year, the transaction closes in 8 weeks, right? There's a fee, a transaction fee of 6%, right? Shuffling property is a slow and sometimes transaction intensive process, but you don't do it often. You buy a house once every 4 years or once every decade or something.
Yep.
So when I replace the house with Bitcoin and I buy Bitcoin worth a house, I can move that on the main blockchain, and I can move it. It could take an hour. I mean, it takes an hour, and maybe the transaction fee is $5. And when I'm using that layer one of Bitcoin, it's really ideal for the property use case. But when you want to get to money commercial frequency, then you don't want to take an hour and you don't want to pay $5 a transaction or $2 a transaction. And when you want to move to energy, the energy case where I might want to do 10,000 transactions an hour or a minute, right? Like, I ask you, how many photons fall on your head when the light bulb is on when you're in the room? Think about the real rate of energy. You go to a party and I turn on the lights and I start playing music, and think about the flow of energy there, right? We're not talking about 10 transactions an hour. We're talking about 10,000 transactions a minute or 10,000 a second even. So we need that high frequency. Whereas Bitcoin is an open protocol for moving digital property on the main chain or moving the core Bitcoin. Lightning is an open protocol, permissionless open protocol to move digital energy, basically move Bitcoin at the speed of light with no friction. Bitcoin is an open protocol that's permissionless to move Bitcoin at a slower speed with a little bit of friction. The primary goal of the Bitcoin protocol is to protect that digital energy for 100 years, right? What we're trying to do is we're preserving it as property in some kind of stasis, like a vacuum pack stasis for 100 years. And the goal of the Bitcoin blockchain or the Bitcoin protocol is I want to store it forever and keep it secure with integrity. The goal of the Lightning protocol is to allow you to move it super fast at the speed of light with no friction. And I'm going to achieve that by decreasing the amount of energy in the network or in the channel while I'm doing that. So Lightning is giving you the ability to apply conservation of energy in cyberspace at light speed. Bitcoin is basically, Lightning wouldn't exist without Bitcoin, right? So in essence, you've got two layers. You could even think of it as like two different types of energy. I'm transferring the energy from one form into another form so that I can move it from oil to electricity so that I can transmit it through the air. Now, the number one problem we have is we got 8 billion people. We got 25 billion computers. We have 100 million companies. And we want to synchronize them in cyberspace, and we want to synchronize them every second. So how do I synchronize in real time all those devices? The universe synchronizes everybody, the entire universe, using forms of energy like light and electromagnetism and gravity and sound and friction, right? I mean, there's a lot of energies that are working in the universe, the strong forces, the weak forces, quantum energy, et cetera, to synchronize the universe. The problem in cyberspace is we need a way to synchronize energy across all these devices and people, and we can't do it at low speed. And that's where Lightning comes in. Lightning gives us a theoretical answer, a way for us to shuffle quanta of Bitcoin in real time in order to solve our problems.
So I think that creates a great foundation for the discussion that I know you'd like to get into a little bit, which is what exactly are these problems, and pragmatically, how can Bitcoin in particular potentially solve some of these problems and some of the applications and things that we interact with every day?
Yeah, I mean, the cyberspace is a mess today. What's the problem with cyberspace? Well, it's kind of the same problem we have with fiat currency. It's fiat corruption of information services in cyberspace. You could boil it down to a nutshell. Everybody has too much power. Everybody has too much power. Anyone can issue requests. Anyone can send any amount of packets. Anyone can send an email. Anyone can imitate anyone else. And there's no cost to spamming, scamming, malicious behavior, and creating chaos and confusion. No cost other than the compute resources. Yep.